the other thing that I find really interesting about how you're using very historic, violent acts in the work is that at the same time, you're using this very dry, very dark, very sarcastic kind of humor to tackle these very difficult issues. And I guess my question is, yeah, did you intend for the work to have these kind of quasi, I don't want to call them outwardly, but like these kind of quasi humorous undertones?
Right. So 100% yes, I was trying to be funny. At least funny to me, in the presentation of the work and the themes behind it, because um, kind of like from like Trevor Noah, and like I've also been looking at like John Oliver too, like, and just like a bunch of other things. Um, Hold on. So I'm gonna back up a bit. Something that someone such as yourself and other people, like, the advisors Heather and Julie and my peers, have noticed, and for the people who will be watching this in the future who know me, is I my sense of humor is very like grounded in like dryness, and very sarcastic, very just blunt and to the point. Just because I think it's kind of funny when you're deadpan and you say maybe troubling things like huh, or it's like, I throughout the history, or throughout the span of the academic year, I've said to Heather multiple times that like I am not a sociopathic like murderer or something, but then like, I'll make an offhand joke and it seems like, I don't know about that. Let the record show I am not a sociopathic murderer. That was just for the sake of context. But what am I trying to say? So I like deadpan humor. I like dryness. I like sarcasm when it comes to things, because um I think so. Humor is a very interesting subject to look at, because it's like many things, a spectrum you where you can have very dry humor about a particular thing, or you can have whatever the opposite of that is. I'm not too sure. But I think like there's a very fine line between when a joke is going too far, or knowing when you're like making a dry joke to kind of get something across. When it comes to my work, I think it's particularly funny to just kind of have like a dry delivery, deadpan humor, because if I I'll give you an example of a joke I often make to my friends. Like, if so, when I say, "Oh, data, like potato, potato, genocide, ethnic cleansing, they're all the same thing." Obviously, like that last one is very troubling. It's like, oh boy, it's like, I don't know, why do you say that? And so I think sometimes when you as in like people plural, like make a joke in a very deadpan, sarcastic, dark way, it kind of sometimes encourages like the audience or recipient of that joke to like wonder about the joke itself, like, like, why did they say that, like, what's the meaning behind it? So when it comes to humor, yes, I think it can be used to like invoke a type of response when you're doing it correctly, because sometimes humor doesn't land and you may end up like inadvertently offending someone or being very insensitive. But I think the use of humor when it comes to very like dark, serious, like mature things such as the pandemic we're going in, it helps to sort of lighten the mood. Because if it's just serious nature, serious nature, serious nature, facts, 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 and so on and so forth, then I think that's very overwhelming, for just everyone, for a lot of people. Overwhelming in the sense that like you kind of get like drained from knowing all this information. So like if we're going to use the example um of this pandemic, then just like all the media news and information about like the confirmed cases and number of deaths and so on and so forth, like it's very overwhelming and very just draining. And it like being serious all the time isn't it's not for simply put, it's not good. It's not fun. Sometimes I think it's good to just look at it like a very serious thing and just kind of laugh at it a little bit.
I think humor can have a very disarming kind of quality.
Mhm.
And that helps us, I think, to deal with things That's why, that's why people watch Trevor Noah and,
Yeah.
John Oliver and everybody else, right? So a lot of your work has centered around addressing issues of inequality, and it seems like right now, you made a pivot to address COVID-19, and in a lot of ways it feels like the work that you just did, like COVID-19 becomes almost a metaphor or a stand-in for other more universal um, issues that might be related to work that you've been thinking about in the past, because you were thinking about issues that had to do with migration, inequality, and otherness, and these kinds of issues. That leads me to my next question, which has to do with how you transitioned. Is COVID-19, working with COVID-19 in this work, like a continuation, or acting as a metaphor or a stand-in, or in relation somehow to those other issues that you were working through in your previous work?
So with my previous work, you're right. Like I was interested in focusing on issues like socio-political issues such as migration. And I think I even started to incorporate um like violence and murders or even just killings against like African American men. And I was even beginning to look at like members of the LGBTQ community. And so why was I doing this? Because I was interested in looking at groups of people, or even just people who have in some ways been kind of, I might be going a bit too far or leaning too much in a different direction by saying systematically oppressed. um but there are these groups of people who oppressed, who have suffered in a number of ways, whose members have been killed or murdered, and so on and so forth. And so I was trying to get at just the idea of why like people treat other people like differently, or like why like the US or the US government would treat and lock up you know refugees, like people from Latin America, and put them in cages like animals. Like why would um not all of them, but why would, policemen or police officers, like, just shoot a man just because they're black? Or why would members of the LGBT community be murdered for just for being that, being themselves? Um, and so I think at the very heart of what I was getting at is, why do people commit these very like horrible things to other people who are different, just for because of one thing, different, so to speak. Um, and so that's kind of what I was focusing at. And then, the pandemic happened in COVID-19. And so there was a pivot, and there was a shift in my work. But it's kind of because, what I presented with my thesis now, um, what I mentioned before the pandemic was kind of not necessarily gone, but I think the spirit and the themes of like people hurting one another is kind of there, because with the work that I presented, I was getting at just like the very absurd nature of like humans in general, and just how how can people be so cruel to one another? Like, let's be honest, it's just like, wow, like it's an eye opener. And yeah, like that's kind of like the heart and like the main focus of what I was doing in my work, is sort of exploring really the nature of people, and just the cruelty and the extent of that we can have against other people.